you want to talk about the sanitization API that Google and Firefox are working on a little bit?
Sure, let's start with that.
I can give a brief synopsis real quick. The overarching idea here is that JavaScript sanitization libraries require constant upkeep. They have to be included in your source code. They have to be, we call it vendored in, right? It's got to be basically pulled. Well, if you don't want to call out externally to someone else's Java, which you shouldn't, JavaScript being hosted somewhere else, you would pull in the JavaScript sanitization libraries, and you would, you leverage them to make sure your input is, you're not putting some malicious JavaScript code reflecting that back, and that's being executed in the DOM and whatever. So my point is about all of this is that the idea here is that instead of using these libraries that have to require upkeep, they pretty quickly can be insecure if not maintained correctly. There's also like weird browser behavior amongst browsers that each library has to kind of adapt to. What they decided to do was work with Cure53, who, if you are not familiar, pretty much the hands down, most knowledgeable people about cross-site scripting attacks would be Cure53. I mean, I think Mario, I'm going to butcher his last name. I'm just saying Mario from there is like very prominent, prolific JavaScript, attacker, researcher. And anyways, so they're working with, they being Google and Firefox, they're working with Cure53 to build a sanitization API that's just accessible in the browser, and it no longer requires you to include JavaScript sanitization libraries to prevent like DOM clobbering and just, having, let me post that API spec as well here real quick.
Yeah,
you can see
Cure53,
examples of it.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say Cure53, they've got a JavaScript library, DOM Purify, right? They're the developers of that. So it makes sense that they're working with Mozilla and with Google on this because they've been on that forefront. And what's super interesting about DOM Purify, right? Like, I know they want you to use the latest version, but it's like an XSS library or a Purify library, right? That sanitizes HTML, but there have been flaws in that as well, right? So there's instances of there's CVEs for DOM Purify, which those guys know. But yeah, they're working on. Yeah. Yep.
We've definitely used DOM Purify in the past. It's like you said, it's a super useful library, but again, these things quickly fall out of. The idea being, instead of like, say, 25 different libraries, we'll say just arbitrarily 25 different libraries requiring upkeep, new things being available JavaScript wise, and them having to like adjust to filter out and modify the library's behavior to adjust for that. You're talking about one team working inside of an API that's just built into the browser, and it can be called, and you can see some on your screen. You should be able to see some code snippets that show like, here's the string. So you see a string to clean object receiver, whatever you want to call it, that has it's basically a string object that's got like some rogue, it says rogue script stuff embedded in it. And when you call, sanitizer.sanitize to string and you pass in that receiver object, it goes ahead and cleans. It looks like it just completely removes that malicious content there. You see it says script and then def. So you see here, it's just completely removed the little malicious example of what a malicious JavaScript looks like. So it's nice because now you have people like, I'm definitely interested in your opinions on this, Seth, but I think it's nice just because you have less split focused among different libraries and more of just like in the product where HTML and JavaScript is going to be rendered, you can in the product call its API to make sure that it's done safely.
Yeah,
there are limitations, but I'm curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this feels like one of those game changers, right? Right. I mean, when we start talking about encoding libraries, and I mean, I go back to SQL injection always, right? Is okay, SQL injection was a problem for years until the underlying way we passed data to databases changed, right? And I mean, it still pops up from time to time, but the number of attacks dropped, or the number of vulnerabilities, exploits that we saw of SQL injection went from every application to 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, because of the way that we changed the underlying technology and the way that developers interacted with it. So if we do the same thing within the browser side of things and just get used to the idea that, hey, whenever we have content, you're developing a client-side HTML, that you use the Sanitize library as opposed to something else. Yes, there's going to be cases where it doesn't work. Yes, there's going to be edge cases. There's going to be issues with it. But we could definitely see that change. And that, like, this goes back to the whole one true framework idea, that it's not we don't put it on the developers to actually make the changes. We make them aware of what's there, and then we give them the tools that do things properly, right? We create the pathway that is, I mean, the least amount of resistance.